Probably a name. There's another problem. Yeah, there's no good thing on there. Like mixing a wallet, mixing couches, mixing crap. I do training and like I never met a person named Couch.
This coast, right? So it seems like.
Right. Yeah. I grew up with Nikki. Yeah, my brother.
We got Nikki's cousin.
Joseph John. Most generic name that you can.
So.
Very easy. Good turn.
Oh, she is. Yeah.
I just can't have him go doing crazy bark.
Yeah.
Charlie.
The bark there, my one should go to the bed, you can take him.
There was confusion.
What?
It's a public works.
Yeah.
That's what I.
Can't hear the talk then.
I can find out.
What's the past?
Yes, sir. I can text her.
I know you wrote it down, so I guess you. I know that, right? I think my phone was missing. I'm sorry. Was it logs in?
Yeah.
I know you haven't been something.
Good evening. It's 6 o'clock. Mayor Johnson is running just a little bit late, but I'm going to go ahead and get this started. I am Sarah Diamond, council member and Ward 3, currently Mayor Pro Tem. So we're going to go ahead and get this moving here. It's now 6:01. So if you would all rise with me and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, for which it stands,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So I'll just go ahead and do roll call here on behalf of City Council, and then I'll pass it over to Mr. Patizzi, and you can, we
Mr.
changed.
Burnett, he's the new one.
Oh, we changed it to me. Okay, perfect.
Supervise this.
I'll pass it over to the commissioners to do theirs. So roll call here for City Council. Mayor Johnson is running late. She should be on her way here shortly. Mr. Lavaca.
Present.
Mr. Burns.
Present.
Mr. Henderson.
Present.
Ms. Keski. Present. Sarah Diamond is present here, and I see Mr. Koch.
Present.
You're online. Perfect. Wonderful.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. And Mr. White.
I'm here.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay. For the planning commission, Pat Huggins. Out here, Matt DeBoyne. Daniel Freiberg.
Present.
Joe Patizzi. Joe Fernet, present. Cassandra Sexton.
All right, and we have everyone. So we're here tonight to discuss the comprehensive plan update. So I'm going to go ahead and pass this off. I will let you introduce yourselves, and then you can let us know where you're at and where we're at with this entire process. We've all received our agenda and our packets for discussion tonight, and those are all a matter of public record on the website as well.
I'm happy to introduce us. Okay, good. Good evening, I'm Tom Glover, I'm the Community Development Director for the city. And tonight we have Donna Keeler and Dan Nichols from Facet Engineer, or Facet, just one old Facet, I think, right? Planning Facet Consultants, who are helping us with our comprehensive plan update. This is a joint workshop with City Council and Planning Commission. And this is an opportunity to give an update to all of you about where we are in our comprehensive plan update so far and get thoughts and feedback from you as we go along.
Right, I'll kick it off. I speak very lightly, so I'm gonna go to the microphone.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
We're actually using the mic in the middle, but
Oh, which one?
it's the owl in the middle.
It should be able
What's
to.
that one? Oh, you should, okay, great,
Yeah, it'll-
okay. Great, so Woody, can you start the presentation? So this presentation, if you attended the open house on July 15th, it's what we're going to see tonight is similar to what we did that night. It has a few additional slides, but we wanted to make sure everybody had the same information as we begin our discussion. So the purpose of this study session is to get both bodies together to kind of get an update on what's happening with the comprehensive plan and discuss some of the new requirements under state law and changes that are going to need to happen with the comprehensive plan, and also just get your feedback on and your thoughts on what your priorities and concerns are. So Woody, can we go to the next one? Okay, I'll skip over that. The highlighted, we've all received an agenda, so the discussion and questions at the end is where I'm hoping we'll spend most of our time on tonight. I'll quickly go over some of these slides because I think for most of you, this will be just a refresher. Next. Okay, all right, so the project team is, of course, leaders of the city, are you, and then the consultants are ourselves, Facet, and we also have another team with us, Kimberly Horn, Clay White, and Heidi Roos, who are working on various parts of the plan as well. Next. So this project is a requirement by the state. It's a top-down requirement, but also it's designed to get a lot of local input on it, and that I will get to in a little bit later, but it begins with the vision for Sedro-Woolley. Next. But just quickly, just a quick overview of comprehensive planning is the long-range plan. These plans are designed to be 20 years or last 20 years, but they need to be updated about every 10 years. And they are they evolve over time based on new requirements and changes in conditions, which is why the state requires communities to update them every 10 years. So the two big requirements that we'll be addressing with this one is how related to housing and climate change. And the overall goal is to anticipate, plan for, and accommodate growth, protect critical environmental areas, and conserve natural resource lands such as farms and forests. That was the original goal for the Growth Management Act, based on concerns that rural lands were being destroyed by urban development. Next. So the scope and the outcome, what we do is we're going to build on what you already have. You have a good plan right now in place, and you have a vision. The vision is about 2 pages long. So we are going to work with staff and all of you to compress it a little bit, to make it a little bit shorter. But that vision is going to work as a foundation for your plan. From there, once we do that, we're going to work on updating your policies and revising policies based on requirements, new requirements and changes in conditions. And those are going to then lead to updates to your development regulations. Next. So the plan, in the end, ideally, carefully manages how the city will grow. It includes a statement of vision, values, and priorities. It guides decision-making, regulations, and investments in the community over that 20-year period, and strives to ensure the health, safety, and well-being of people living in Sedro-Woolley. Next. Going back to the vision, we have spent quite a bit of time with the survey that we sent out on this vision. We had, I think, about 165 responses to it. And the reason for that is that it's a very important part of the document. It describes the values and priorities and ties directly to each element in the plan, which is why the survey results, the comments that we received during the open house, and any other comments we received today will help inform your vision. Next. Most of you already know what's in the plan. The list on the left, it's what's in there, except for the one on the bottom. Climate change and resiliency is new and is required by the state. The sub-area plans for the Swift Center and Urban Village mixed overlay will not be touched during this process. Next. New housing requirements. So House Bill 2020, okay, backing up a little bit, housing has always been a requirement for comprehensive plans, but this is the first time that we have had to plan by income band. So it's a new process for everybody statewide. We also need to provide for emergency housing, shelters, and permanent supportive housing, and policy regulations to address racial disparities. Now, by providing for housing, it doesn't mean we have to build it. We just have to provide or show that there's capacity for it. Also, House Bill 1337 allows for at least 2 ADUs per lot. And House Bill 1110, which is a middle housing, allows for, it's not required for, it's optional for smaller jurisdictions like Sedro-Woolley, but provides a pathway to develop an ordinance for middle housing. And middle housing, by that I mean by duplexes. It's housing that would be compatible in a single family neighborhood, but might be smaller, more compact cottages and duplexes, triplexes, townhomes, and things like that. Next. Now, to figure out what is needed in Sedro-Woolley, we are working right now on a housing needs assessment and gap analysis. And based on forecasted growth by data that we've received from the state, we anticipate that the city will grow by 31.8% above the 2022 population. And the gap analysis and the assessment will also provide data and insights on how to most appropriately meet the city's share of differing housing needs that we'll need from families, workers, and also senior housing. And it answers questions such as, are some neighborhoods at risk of displacement, such as mobile home parks? Next. House Bill 1181 also requires comprehensive plans to include a climate element and a resiliency sub-element in their plan. It doesn't mean you have to have a whole separate chapter. You can actually disperse policies on climate element or resiliency throughout different elements, if that's what you choose to do. So that will be part of our discussion here tonight. Next. Also, we want to make a note that the changes to the housing element will drive changes to other elements that are part of the plan, and including the economic development and the other elements listed here, parks and recreation, transportation, and capital facilities. So we do anticipate making some changes to those elements as well. Next. A very important part of comprehensive plan updates is public engagement. And here are a list of things that we've done to date. We started out with a communication and outreach plan And we've done a number of different activities and publications, such as the visioning survey that went out, which was also done in Spanish. We had the open house on the 15th of July, comment forms, a press release, webpage, which Tom and his staff helped set up. And we did a flyer for one event early on. We also are formed, with Ashton's help, a climate policy advisory team that will be meeting soon. And we've reached out to the tribes, and we believe there's one tribe that has indicated interest in participating and collaborating with local and state agencies. But we're not finishing here. We're going to continue doing public outreach throughout the whole process and accepting comments all the way to the end. Next. So here's the schedule. We are in August here, and over the next month, between August and early next year, we're going to be finishing up the housing needs analysis, figuring out what the gaps are, particularly with housing, and working on the climate element, also reviewing all the other chapters to see if there are any other changes that need to be done, and working with the Planning Commission throughout as this information becomes available. And what I would like to ask from you is how you would like to do that, if we would be coming to you every month, or bringing a lot of bulk of changes to you. And for example, 3 months worth of work versus coming just once a month. So we also anticipate having a second joint workshop sometime in the spring of 2025. And that's it, I think. What do you, next? We have some questions that we wanted to ask you, but I wanted to see if you had any questions specific to this information presentation tonight.
Can you send the slides to the council and planning commission?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
In your population analysis with that 31.8% growth rate, you were using a 2022 number. What number did you exactly use? Things aren't linear. So when I see numbers like that, things aren't straight up. You know, populations will vary depending on a whole bunch of different factors. So what number did you exactly start off with for 2022?
I'd have to get the exact, Matt, who's on our team, who was supposed to be here tonight, he had a family emergency and he was going to present that information. I'll ask him that, but generally what we do is we get our information from Office of Financial Management in the state, and I know you're familiar with them. And they get theirs from the US Census data, and then the OFM does projections from the census data that they provide to all the cities. And so I will ask Matt to, I'll ask him what figure he used.
I think that number was between 12 and 14,000. I'm just curious because I'm throwing a 31.8% growth rate on it. I'm getting well below, which is good, of what we were originally told. I would say about
Right.
2 or 3 years ago, I heard numbers like we were expected to be like 24,000 or so people. I was like, how are we getting to that number? I'm just not seeing it. So be curious to see how that math came up with, because when we plan and we all look at the different factors involved, we want to make sure that we're not over zoning, so to speak, put in way too much density in certain respects to preserve the character of this community, that we're still compliant with our GMA requirements. So that's why that's going to be a big discussion when we get into different housing elements later on. Thank you.
I would say, when I first came on the council, I had the same discussion with John about our comprehensive plan and the projected growth over the 30-year, over into 2036. And it looked like we were gonna almost double in size at 1.7 people per home and how many homes they projected. And so we've been hearing that we're right along with those numbers. And so the densification that we're seeing is part of the plan, but we're not growing at that rate. And then the 38% seems comparable to other cities, like Mount Vernon was much lower. They were like 15-20% growth. I looked at their comprehensive plan. So that was one thing that, are you doing it on the homes or population? because it was like 1.7, 1.8 people per homes.
We're doing it based on population.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think when we originally did it up, it was showing, here's how many homes will be included, and they did the math on so many people per home. on average.
Right, I think when we finish our housing needs analysis and do the gap analysis, then we'll be able to figure out those numbers as well. Yeah, all right, those numbers also include, for example, hospitals, or prisons, or any facility, even when you have communal people living together, we include those numbers as well. Yeah,
I think for me at least, we kept hearing, yeah, we need to build up in the densification to meet that number. And I don't think that number was ever real. But I think that's what you're saying too. Thank you.
okay, oh. Sorry.
Forgive me, when I was preparing for this meeting, looking at the website and the comprehensive plan, I believe it said that we evaluate the plan after 5 years, I think. But you mentioned that we revisit the plan every 10 years.
And you're correct. Yeah, so, we do a whole scale change or update every 10 years, but every 5 years, jurisdictions are supposed to do a minor review. Yeah, and then you also have the option to do even minor yearly amendments once a year. Yeah,
Thank you.
good catch on that. Yeah. Any other questions before we jump into some of the discussion questions I have? Can you jump over to the next slide? So what we were hoping to do tonight is just, we wanted to get your thoughts on some comments that, prevalent comments that we saw during the survey, and also in regard to housing, since we're having to now plan by income band, what your thoughts are on what kinds of housing should go where. Hi. And so, starting with downtown, there were a lot of comments received about revitalizing downtown, maintaining businesses, keeping residential uses, especially on the main floor, at bay, so that retailers could work there, continue working out of there. And so what I wanted to ask all of you is if you had any thought or policy, I'm sure you have, policies and regulations you would like to see in place to encourage more retail and just overall activity in the downtown area.
So something that recently came up, I was walking through one of the historic businesses downtown that came for sale. And the person I was with wanted to look at purchasing it. But unfortunately, with the upstairs, if they couldn't turn that into potential residents, then they couldn't make their business go downstairs because they wouldn't have an income coming in every month, that they would know that, okay, I can give this business a shot and maybe we can have, you know, I don't want to give away what it was, but something unique there. So it kind of made me sit back and look at it a little bit differently than I might have thought before. If we could work something out with the parking regulations so that the people in the front can still go to these businesses on the floor, but allow for someone to even try to have a business downtown. They couldn't even revitalize that building unless they could get the income above. So somehow working it so it works for everybody, the business and potential rental income.
Well, you can do that now.
Can you?
Yeah. We actually were just taking a look at that on some of our recent changes to look at the amount of floor space you need for the business on the bottom, with absolutely the ability to put the living quarters up on the second floor. So that's a definite yes.
For not the owner down below, but for anybody.
Yeah, it doesn't matter who's up there. You can still do the number of units. I think depends on the size of the building. parking was definitely the issue. So we were looking at, the things where you park behind the building. We weren't including, let's say, if there was a garage or something into that accountable space for the business on the bottom. But the idea is to absolutely encourage businesses up front, frontage up front. And if they're going to have a second story or potentially third story apartment in the downtown on the CBD.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just different entrances that we're going to require, whether it's on the side, it's gonna be up in the front, it's gonna be limited. Because we want it mostly for businesses, but yeah, you can do residences up on.
Because we had talked about in the past the alleyway
Right,
and, if the potential spots in the back could be for those buildings that are, it's right
it
behind.
would be for the building that occupies
Yeah,
that space,
yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, we're just working on a lot of that stuff, just changing the different dimensions on different things, and you're gonna see that, I think. It's coming up. It's coming up. I think we have a public hearing at our next meeting. We weren't doing this.
Okay.
So that's all scheduled. So you're gonna see that in details. And we typically send you guys emails.
that's awesome.
We
Yeah.
should probably note too that Mayor Johnson joined us a little bit ago, for the record, just so it's on.
So something along the lines of the downtown area, something that we did try to do with the opportunity zones was give the builders the opportunity to come into these buildings, refurbish them, and they would put apartments upstairs, and they would be more reasonable rates for people probably within the 30 to 50 percentile of the AMI. And but we gave tax cuts, it would be tax cuts and that would be given to the builders to do that. And it was a way of bringing people into the downtown area, filling that space up above their existing spaces anyway. And it also gave a chance to refurbish those buildings, making them more stable for, you know, any kind of event that may come along. So like an earthquake, but that's something that we did talk about doing back in 18 and 19. And never really had any takers with the builders for the opportunity zones, but still, if that's something that is encouraged, that might be an option for the downtown. And I see maybe it even fits in with the housing that you have below with existing low income neighborhoods or whatever, I'm not sure, but.
Do you have a sense of the reasoning why the builders didn't take advantage of it? Well, you also hit COVID.
We did, and
Yeah.
again, in 18, building was really starting to take off again from the 2008. And so it had been a dry spell for contractors. And so my take on it, I don't know how spot on I am or how way off the mark I am, but I think that they were looking to make an income. They needed to make an income. They hadn't been able to really build or make money at it for almost a decade. So they weren't really interested in doing that kind of thing where the profit level wouldn't be as great. So it was just kind of circumstances, just the way the circumstances. But I don't know, I could be wrong. I don't know how many, I think Mount Vernon had one of their opportunity zones. It was used, or somebody took advantage of, but I don't know about the other cities that happened. It didn't happen. I think we had 2 or 3 opportunity zones in this area.
To add into that, a lot of the problems that we have here in town, a lot of the structures are old. So when we look at old, that means that we have asbestos, lead. There's a lot of contamination that was we didn't consider contamination back then, but to mitigate the different buildings, I think the city's doing a building right now, but we have stuff in there. That was just the way it was back then. So you have to go with the hazmat suits and everything else. That's expensive. So I think that could be part of the reason too.
Yeah, it could
They're
be.
great buildings, but at the end of the day, you still need to.
And I think also several of the big buildings downtown, they're not owned by the business owner. They're owned by somebody else. I think maybe more than half of them, they live out of city. Maybe they're from Seattle, maybe even different county. So that could be another reason as well. I'm not sure. But it's just, I don't know, an idea of.
Are you able to repeat the first question that you asked that started the discussion? About the housing in the business district?
repeat the question or?
Yeah.
You
It's
mean,
great. So it's, bullet point one, are the policies or regulations? Okay. Yeah, so. What I've heard from the community is regulations when it comes to business, or, maybe there's too much. And I know that we've had discussion and definitely with Director Glover about like streamlining the regulation process. I know a lot of that's with build process, but also businesses. And I had a business specifically talk to me about needing to get approval to put a sign on their door, and then it needed to be checked out and vetted and approved before they can even open their business, this big runaround. And it's a discouragement in a way for businesses to thrive here when we put so much emphasis on them. We do have our historic district, we do have criteria, but maybe we can look at loosening that, removing whatever doesn't need to be there, and then having a streamlined process, something digital that can move that along and allow businesses that want to come in to thrive. And I love the idea. I mean, I think, and I thought it was that you can live in your business upstairs at this point, but I didn't know it was for renting it out. But if somebody had like a rental up there that supplemented income down below during the winter season or something, even because we know there's an ebb and flow with business around here. Our summers seem to thrive, and we keep it active in the winter, but weather permits us to do so much. I mean, Christmas is a hit; people love it, over town, but February, people aren't, roaming town to shop for plants or
If I'm not mistaken, those regulations that are in place now are for mixed use commercial and not necessarily the central business district for the live upstairs and work downstairs, or live upstairs and work downstairs. I could be wrong, but I
You're
think
gonna be
that's,
saying, we just spent a lot of time working on that, so it's coming your way. After the public hearing, you're gonna get a great opportunity. We spent a lot of time on that, specifically the parking.
Yeah.
Where you can enter, all that, all those details. So I think you're gonna like what you see, and if you don't, obviously you're gonna be able to, edit things and ship it on back and take another look at it. That's coming.
Yeah, but right now it is different, and then we have our historic district downtown, and it's relatively small compared to other communities, some communities have really extensive historic districts. Paulsbo is one I'm thinking of. I mean, it's pretty neat how they do their thing. So, but we kind of tightened the leash with businesses when it came to what they can and can't do.
so Donna, one of the things I was thinking of for retail and business in the downtown area, we call it the central business district on our zoning map, the historic downtown specifically. A lot of restaurants do pretty well down there. We've had a lot of startup restaurants fail, and one of the reasonings behind that is their inability to sell liquor for their first however many days after they open for liquor licensing. That's not something we control as a city. That's through the state. But if there was a way for us to be a liaison to the state for up and coming businesses and just try and promote that, or try and talk to the state and help streamline that process. We want to be business friendly. We want people to be here.
yeah,
The
I've
lower
heard
tax
sometimes
rates.
it can take months to get that the liquor license.
It can, and a lot of the problem is a lot of these people who are trying to open up a business, you don't have deep pockets, and if you can't weather the storm, I mean, a lot of people won't see a profit for their first year of owning a restaurant or more. And so you have to have deep enough pockets to weather that storm. But anything that we can do to be business friendly, to encourage people to come here to, so that's one of the things I was thinking about downtown, because I always like going down there and eating, and I know a lot of other people do, and parking then becomes an issue and all that other stuff. So like, we got one parking lot that's always full, and then it's hard to find a spot. If you want to get to one restaurant, you got to park in front of another one, and then they see you walking across the street to the end. So, but that was my take on that first question. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Is there a way to encourage growth east as far as the downtown goes, to make it like Reach Street or even up more I think the lamp post that was discussed, especially in front of like the museum and going down, is a good way to get people, more businesses, restaurants, and then people actually walk through the community versus just on Metcalf. And we do Metcalf and State, and we do Berry a little bit, but we have a pretty locked in downtown community where it doesn't leave a lot of cycling, especially like during a festival, like a rodeo. People kind of do this number and then they're like, okay, I've seen it. I'm on my way, versus cycling around to do it again and again.
That makes sense. One of the other things that was brought up to me by people that come in for recreational sports is the fact that we have a lot of businesses that are not open on Sundays, or have very reduced hours. So when they're coming in and out for tournaments and family outings and stuff, or even coming after church and want to go get brunch and then go kind of wander and shop, the shops are closed. And as business owners, that's their decisions. But in the downtown business district, that does create those sorts of issues in losing revenue, sales revenue coming in that would help to support a lot of different aspects of the community.
Donna, in your experience with other cities, is there anything that we could be doing that you've seen that would help encourage the downtown activities, the festivals, the sporting events to come? Like, what is your experience that we could be doing differently? You worked with a lot of cities, right?
I have, yeah, I mean, you're doing a lot of things really well. You really are. One of the things I've learned is that, for example, the mixed use, which you're already doing downtown, I found to be a good thing because it keeps people downtown 24 hours a day, right? There's a lot of pressure in some communities to do Airbnbs and wanting to do Airbnbs at street level. And the problem with that, because they're getting good return on their Airbnbs, right? But allowing them to be established at street level then reduces the number of retail places, and the reason for people come there start to disappear. So I would encourage you to keep everything retail or commercial at street level and allow residential above or below if there's a below. Yeah. And probably there were a couple of suggestions at the open house that I took to heart, and one of them were your gateways. There are a couple comments. There's your entryway coming in from the west into town. A couple people said, gosh, it'd be nice to make this one lot that it's not very appealing when you come in, that there might be something you could do with that. And you probably heard this and know more than I do, but things like that. And also, I don't know if you've had any placemaking consultants come and talk to you.
Well, we did have Peter, yeah. And he had some great ideas.
Yeah.
And it did generate a lot of enthusiasm, and it triggered the economic grant that the council put together for businesses to apply for. And we just finished that up. It was quite successful. Yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah, sometimes just some minor design changes can make a huge difference. And the work that Tom and his staff are doing right now with addressing parking and housing, I think is really going to help a lot. Bringing housing into your business core district and the areas around there, it's just going to liven it all up, just naturally. So those were just some of the things that off my head I could think of.
So one thing that we've been told is that by a couple different individuals who came into town, that there's a lot of wonderful qualities about Sedro-Woolley, but it lacks an identity. Do you have that impression at all? Yeah. Because having an identity, they said, is what you draw on, and that is what really brings people in, is having that identity. So, for example, when Councilwoman Diamond was talking about the different baseball, sorry, competition that's happening and whatnot. That if we were a city that did that, that would bring people and they would know us for that, but I don't know if you have any thoughts on that at all.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what you think, Dan, but I think you have an identity and, you're located right at the base of the Cascades. So you're the gateway into the Cascades, but then you also have a very rich history. And this is just me from coming from the outside, because you all know this city way better than I do, but you have that historic downtown, and then you have the history of all the different types of economic uses that you had here historically, right? And I think there's been a lot of attempts to keep those alive, right? And but where I see you going, and Charlie and I had a little bit of conversation about this at the open house, is recreation. But not only for baseball and soccer games, but also for hiking and bicycling. Gravel biking is huge now. And I see gravel bikers coming over this way and taking off, leaving from here or coming back here and staying over here. But that's just some of my initial thoughts. I don't know what you all think.
So I've been around to a lot of different towns and cities, and I do agree, like Port Townsend has its identity. Still, Squim has an identity, Port Angeles, Hallsville, Leavenworth, Anacortes. And when I'm here, I just get this sense of our Parks and Rec has been our identity. We just haven't really tapped into it, but it's so diverse and there's so much there. And I think we're working toward building that out, because we have skate parks, we have bike trails, we have horseback, we have extensive disc golf, we have ballpark fields, we have amphitheater at the riverfront. We can just keep going and going too. There's a lot, and that's really a staple that's unique to a lot of the places I've seen. One of the big things I think we've all had good discussion on is our ports of entry coming in, and it's all of it, whether it's 9 coming from north, or it's 20 coming east, or it's 9 coming kind of from the east, I guess, on the other side. Cook Road coming in. It all kind of comes into this blasé kind of feel. And you don't really feel like you're entering into a town or there's a crisp, beautiful town. Our beautiful sign is right there at Ferry Street, and you're almost all the way through town by the time you get to it. And then you miss it and you go across the trestle, and then you're like, okay, now where to go, and then you're out of town. There's not really a lot that says, hey, beauty this way, come this way. We have little signs with like 8 little things on there. I don't know if you've seen them. And they're like, if you can read it at 35, you might see museum, but you don't know where it is. You know, it's just, so those are areas we've been really kind of considering. What can we do to have something unique as an entry point sign, and then beautify that area?
Already done it. You brought forth. It just hasn't gone anywhere.
You know what I've always said, because what I'm hearing right now is exactly was my first impression when I came here 30 years ago. You hit the industrial center. It's nothing but industrial. Everybody thinks that's the town. We can just mandate that they just screen it. Leland, Cypress, whatever, that you're not looking into this industrial center. They're like, hey, I got to get out of this.
Yeah.
Then they go under the trestle, and somebody had a really great comment. Put a roundabout there where people can steer over to Metcalf, things like that. Is right. People totally miss amazing stuff that's out there. We can't capitalize it because their attention's being drawn someplace else. They think that industrial center is this town, and it's just so not. It's such a small part of this town. This town's amazing. See, I don't want to get the secret to get out about all this. It's a selfish thing.
Well, I'm looking at it for the residents, like that everybody here can.
I know.
I mean, you can do what Leavenworth did. They sent, are you laughing? 'Cause you know what it is. They sent their city council, I don't know if their planning commission, to Bavaria to get their, they all flew over there and to get ideas, to meet with the locals, and that's where they got their design guidelines from.
Maybe we should do a Hawaiian thing.
Yeah.
Bahama thing.
Road trips are very, very important on our planning commission. We did them all the time. A lot of our code came from road trips to other places. So
So let me move on. This is all very helpful. Thank you.
Can I say something real quick?
Oh, yes, sure.
Yes, I've made this point before. Years ago, I worked in Anacortes, and there was considerable concern about their downtown because they have this enormous amount of traffic turning to the ferries on their main drag. So that's when they put up, and Councilman Lavac, I think, made a great point on this. That's when they put up that arch. And the arch was to give people the idea, yeah, you can go there. You know, here's a cool place to go that you might not be aware of. And, you know, I think something maybe at the trestle, I know there's been some ideas on that, but some way to direct people in. So this downtown is more of a, not only two things. One, people just coming through town go, oh, that's cool, I want to go there. Or two, part of it as kind of a destination, because I know there's plenty of people coming through town, or you know, the scenic loop over the North Cascades that may say, hey, I'd love to look at that museum in Sedro-Woolley. So I think you've got to be able to direct people to the downtown and give them a real reason to go there. That it's just my point. Thank you.
Thank you. Kind of to your point about directing and detracting, right? Yeah. Okay. So moving on to the next question, we kind of touched about this a little bit, is parks and recreation. What do you see the city needs? I'm thinking ahead for 20 years. So kids growing up here, having families here, where do you see shortages? What it's hard to anticipate what the fad's going to be in 20 years. It's going to be pickleball or something else. But in terms of passive and active recreation.
Let's see, connectivity between the parks. I know that's something we've talked about a few times during council meetings, but finding a way to set aside those little strips of real estate so we can have bike paths to go between.
Not only between the parks, but between schools and.
Yes, connecting everything, or especially the kids would be able to run without trouble.
I thought that was part of our comprehensive plan. We were working on that. Isn't that, Tom? Is that part of our comprehensive plan?
Take a look.
Yeah. I mean, it probably is. Yeah. And then we can revisit that policy to see if it's strong enough or it can be added elsewhere. Yeah.
It'd be really cool to see like, kind of like a living park structure where, you know, we have all of our parks listed, but you know, as we build new parks or parks change or not, we can update that. But on an advanced technology board, that's like a touch screen downtown at the clock. And you have a big thing that you can get on and you can open up the parks and look at, but it's mirrored that same thing on our website. So we can actually go, okay, I want to go here, and it'll pull it up, and then you can spread it out, get directions, see pictures, find out, do I need anything? Can I do fishing or biking? And then move that around, and that becomes like a hub that people, when they want to come visit, they stop there to figure out which park they're going to do today. I would say you can spend your entire weekend playing somewhere here and come back the next weekend and do something completely different. And if you had a hub where you can find that at and it mirrors the website, so you can just have it on your phone, you go, oh yeah, I was going to go right here. That would be cool.
Why not expand that out to other things? Like, I'm hungry, where do I go to eat? You can go to that same board and just pick whatever the heck activity you're looking to do.
Even you can
Think
order
like the
from it.
mall, like you go there, you're like, okay, what am I shopping for today, you know?
Right?
Yeah,
Start pictures, the interactive.
Yeah.
kiosks,
yeah.
essentially.
But if it's not in use, maybe have like some screensaver that's like beautiful art of Sedro-Woolley or something going
Keeps
through, right?
changing.
Yeah, and then you go out, walk up to it and motion senses you there, and it automatically pops up the screen that has all your restaurants, parks, order your food right there, ride your bike over to the, you know, we can do like a poker run, pub to pub.
We have I have Sandra on the planning commission. It's my first year. Thanks, Joe, for bringing me on. And Mayor Julia. I have 5 kids, all of them in sports. And Sedro-Woolley has a big culture around sports. And if we were to put really nice playing fields and sports, you know, structures like basketball, you know, indoor basketball courts and things like that, you know, in these parks. I was on the board for the Sedro-Woolley Youth Football League for 4 years. And in 1 year, we had over 350 kids enrolled, 80% of them from, you know, split families. And between parents and grandparents, we did the math and we calculated we're between 6.5% to 7% of the population of Sedro-Woolley coming to youth sporting events. And it's a big commitment. And, you know, when we were doing fundraisers and things, like just last month, we did a fundraiser, you know, for a car wash for the youth football league. We raised $9,000. You know, these are families who invest very heavily into community and community sports. As of 2 or 3 years ago, we got approval from the high school to play at the high school football field. It's a cost to the league. It's $500 a game. Otherwise, we're doing practices at Denny Edinburgh Memorial Field. We used to have to do games there too. And Denny Edinburgh is in the middle of kind of nothing. You know, you're going down residential streets. And so if you had nice sports complexes that were somewhere close or put strategically where you needed to drive through town, you know, I think you would get a lot of parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, friends that are stopping in between games, after or before games, to eat, to shop, you know, to hang out, because we do have a very large percentage of families that are involved in youth sports in this community, and it's a really important thing, and they invest heavily into it.
I've heard that from so many families, just real time right now, and I think we're working on it. We don't have anywhere to practice today. And we need more fields today. And so I think that the council's kind of discussed that too. But even outside of making money on patrons visiting places, our own residents now have a big backyard to play in. And it's worth it for the city, even if we're not like directly profiting immediately off that or at all.
Well, in all reality, our residents are paying taxes for us to provide that. And so, you know, they should have a place for their children and their grandchildren and friends and families to be able to go and play those sports and make those friends and make those memories. And that's part of the whole thing. One of the roadblocks I can speak to that I've run into in running tournaments and running programs is that, for example, Sedro-Woolley Little League had 16 T-ball teams. There was nowhere for them to practice. And they played their games in the parking lot of Riverfront Park. They set up threw down little bases, and kids were literally playing in the middle of parked cars. We had to block them off, and kids played there. Is it ideal? Absolutely not, right? There's just, even with the resource we have, these are tax-paying citizens that are signing their kids up for youth sports, and these leagues are still paying to use facilities. They're not getting them for free. Little League pays, youth soccer pays. They do all that stuff, and we still don't have space for them. And so we need to solve those problems as well, and make sure that our taxpayers are getting their use out of it as well, and their children's needs are being taken care of in playing these sports. And Cassandra is 100% correct. Grandparents come in, aunts and uncles come in, all these other people come in, and these families are more than happy and more than willing and welcome to take them to our town and take them in and go have lunch and go shopping and go do those things. But those businesses also have to be open, and those businesses also have to have the capacity in order to have those people in, and our fields and resources have to be maintained. And I can tell you right now, you actually have to go search through the weeds of the backstop of Janakey Fields to find your ball, because it is not kept up. And there's teams practicing out there right now that are digging out there trying to find balls because the weeds are not kept up. And it's because it's run by the school district and maintained by the school district, and nobody has control over that. Especially during when school is out and there's limited staff and all of those sorts of things. So you run into those issues. When you run tournaments, you're looking at the fees. $500 a game is pretty expensive, right? And that then trickles down into the cost of the players' fees and all of that sorts of stuff that has to be allocated out. So what used to be $75 for a season has turned into $150 for a season because you've come down to the overhead cost of the facility fees.
$450 per child.
And it's insane, right? You don't,
3 months.
and that probably doesn't include their gear,
Yeah.
you know? And so you get down to all of those little things, and then as the community and as the city raises rates on those sorts of things,
it comes back down to the individuals that are playing, the families that are playing, and hits their pocketbooks again. So not only are they increased in taxes and they're getting less services, but they're also paying for it on the back end by paying their player fees and stuff. And that's a problem. It's a huge problem, especially when we've got the inflation and everything else that we're dealing with, and families are struggling. And so we can limit that stuff and still allow these families and these kids great opportunities and safe places to be. That's what we, in my opinion, should be fostering for our community when we're talking about parks and rec and those sorts of issues. And so then if we have these people coming in and utilizing the downtown district, bringing in sales revenue that can help contribute back into that, that's great. We have a hotel that is currently being built. It's a very small one, but there's a head tax that comes in with that, and a portion of that goes back into recreational activity. So we've got a little bit there, but one of the other concerns and comments that I have also received is the fact that we don't have adequate places for people to stay if they come here for the weekend. So even if they're going up to the North Cascades, say they have a hiking adventure and they just need a place to crash for one night, there's nowhere to go. Three Rivers Inn has been hit and miss in all reality, based on the comments and stuff that I have received. And other than that, they stay in Burlington or Mount Vernon. And so that's lost revenue that we're having there, and we are the gateway to go up into the Cascades. And so I think we need to somehow find a balance there to take advantage of that, bring in that revenue to help support our youth and our community and not have to pull that out of the taxpayers, but also use that as somehow a way to drive them back into town as well, so that you've got those family members and friends that are having time together, but also bringing that tax revenue back in to keep things down.
Does it make sense to set aside a percentage of playfield space per capita that we have? You're saying like 6.5% of the populace is playing sports in the field, and just kids, not to mention parents and everything. So if we're building out a plan, would it be like sensible to say, okay, well, as we're building out, if we anticipate this 38% growth, we have to have 38% playfield or space available. We have Reed Street Park just sitting there. We have the field on the other side of the dog park just sitting there. We have fields that the city owns that aren't being utilized for that purpose, which wouldn't be very much to do. But if we're growing, we could take that money into those areas and say, okay, well, we need to keep the playfield space in accordance with any kind of what we currently have, bring it up to par, and then keep it in line with the growth.
So there is a calculation on our parks. That's definitely.
Yeah,
Ours is actually excellent. Ours
Yeah,
is
we
like
have
something
really
about
good parks.
20 per 1,000 residents.
that's it, parks though, right? Or is that playfield?
It's all parks.
Yeah,
It's a total gross calculation of the amount of square footage we have by a population calculation, where Seattle is like something like 0.5. See, everything you guys are bringing up, the school districts basically control a lot of
Of all
those
of that.
resources. And when I was looking through some of the comments there, a lot of the populace doesn't understand that the school district is a separate entity than the city.
Right.
So if there was a better coordination that could go down between the school district, just things you just brought up about weeding and things like that. That's where the key is. Both entities need to work together.
Right.
Now I'm going to my 20th season as a high school, middle school wrestling referee. I see all these kids. I see the resources. I see the commitment. I see the crazy parents. I mean, wrestling is back at Sedro-Woolley.
Yeah.
And I had to throw one guy out. I was like, they're just going insane. So yes, our facilities for all of our sports are critical to this city. And I see it up and down. I call them the Beast of Highway 9, from Linden straight down to Snohomish, Lake Stevens, all of them. Athletics are huge. So the integration between the school districts, as well as what we have as resource-wise as a city, that needs a little bit better coordination. And I know somebody that has somebody she could talk to see if we could get maybe a conversation going on. But shared facilities, maybe maintenance of those facilities, that's really the way to go, because we really do have a lot of gifts in this town, tremendously so. It's how we integrate it and manage it. When you have one side here and the other side here, it's best to get together and combine what resources we have, because we have amazing stuff.
I had a comment about the school district in the survey. Well, first of all, we've had a recent meeting where there was concerns that our schools were being overwhelmed by development. But then there was a kind of knowing statement in the survey or the responses that Sedro-Woolley School District was actually under-enrolled by 300 students. And my understanding, and I could be wrong on this, is that state funding for school districts, in addition to the levies, is based on enrollment. So if the enrollment is low, then their ability to fix schools or hire teachers is affected. I don't know what the answer is. I mean, is our development affecting school districts, or is the enrollment actually low, so low that, and that's been an issue if you read the media all over the state. School districts are struggling coming out of COVID, with a lot of them with low enrollment because for whatever reason, a lot of kids are, learning at home or moving or whatever. So that'd be a question I'd like to know. And I guess once the school year starts, maybe we'll have a better idea of what their head count is and how that affects their schools. Thank you.
Something else I recall seeing in there that I've heard from a few residents now is a possibility of a public pool. I figure cost-wise, that's probably something that's far out on the horizon, but I don't know if there's appetite for considering that in our long-term plans as well. That's another activity for schools if the pool is large enough.
You get a team going on at the high school.
Exactly, one more sporting event for kids to participate in, keeps them out of trouble. But I've heard that over the years from a number of people, and when I noticed that in the comments, it caught my attention. I'd be curious if maybe the Y could tell us how many people they have going from Sedro-Woolley over there and utilizing their pool on a regular basis. Give us an idea if there's actually a wider want for it.
Build it, they will come.
Yeah, I suspected that would probably happen.
That's a resource.
Really, how many public pools are there in the area?
Yeah, Riverside has a pool, the other products center, $75 a month. Why? That's it.
Then you go to what, Anacortes, I think, has a public pool system. So there's not much around.
If you're gonna do something like that, you need to take a look at forming a public facilities district. If you're gonna wait for the city to do it or for the school district to do it, it ain't gonna be here in my lifetime. So I've been telling people, if you want a swimming pool, you need to get everybody together and create a facilities district. Because the city's job is police, fire, sewage, all that stuff, and fields are down, down the list quite a bit, even though they may be some of our favorite things. And another thing that I keep thinking of when we're talking about ball fields, they built Janeke Field, Little League put in a ton of money, lots of volunteers, lots of things. Agreement was made of how it was gonna be used. That lasted about a year. And anytime you take a look at different things that happen with government entities, once they get what they want, they forget that you exist. So public facilities districts is probably one possibility to get something done.
Is it a common practice that public facility districts would handle baseball fields, football fields? Would that be?
I can't remember the name of the town down north of Vancouver. The city built, but it was a public facility. They got a hell of a operation there for baseball and softball. So things can be done, but you gotta figure out how we're gonna do this, because the city's not gonna be able to pull it up because the cities need money all the time. So public facilities district, you get people to support it and go that way. And McIntyre Health, I think, is a public facility district, I believe, so. It can be done, but if we're gonna take it out of the existing pot of gold, we ain't gonna get far.
South Whidbey Island has a Parks and Recreation District that they have quite a few facilities, and they're now looking at putting in a pool. And so they took it to a vote, and the first time it didn't pass, and I don't know how the second time went. But I think they're determined, they're gonna put in a pool at some point. And then Oak Harbor has one too, but it's just for their pool. And, but I don't know of any other, I'm sure there's many more around the state. But it is a common, he's correct, it's a very common way of paying for recreational facilities. It's just that the community generally has to vote for it and be in favor of it.
They vote to tax themselves.
Right.
And at the end of the day, I mean, he's 100% correct. The city is here, the fields and facilities and that sorts of stuff does fall to the bottom in regards to all of the other stuff. The streets, the roads, the garbage, the sewer, all of that stuff comes first. But the parks and stuff come second. So we do have to be very careful in how we discuss that, because that does take additional manpower to maintain and to manage. And so that's where we have a lot of this stuff. But what we really need to do is hone in on the communication and how that can be worked together between all the different entities that are involved in that, whether it be the school district or private entity or whatever would come up. I mean, I know that there have been plans since 1990 to put in a brand new softball, baseball complex, as well as the possibility of adding on to it for different things. But none of that has ever come to surface. And so we can talk about it all day long, but the reality is Councilmember Loy is correct in that it's probably not going to happen in any near future, but we do need to utilize what we have properly and communicate properly with the right entities in order to make that sorts of things happen. And the growth that is expected and the population and the ages of the population is what needs to be considered when we're discussing all of it, because that's what's feeding into our community. And so if we're looking at all of this different housing in the downtown district and all that sort of things, what kind of socioeconomic status are we looking at? What kind of household are we looking at? Is this a 2-person household? Is this a 6-person household? You know, what are we overall seeing as a whole? Because then that's where you hone in and look at where these resources are going to pull, and what's the residual income look like that's going to actually go into this? Because there's a great bigger picture. We can talk all day long about it, but you know, we're not going to get anywhere if we have all of these big plans, but on the other side of it, you have no tax revenue to generate to support it. Because at the end of the day, the last thing I would like to see is Sedro-Woolley become a low-income bedroom community with no infrastructure and no revenue to support it. And I don't think there's anybody in this room that actually would like to see that. And so we have to be very careful about how we're talking about it and what we want to see and what we want to do, because it is a place that we want to live. We want our children to live. And when I look at things and I look at decisions, I have 2 girls. Is the decision I make today going to change going to change their lives 20 years down the road? Is this a place that they're going to want to come to live and raise a family in when they become of age and make those decisions? And if the answer is yes, then, you know, maybe that's all okay. And if the answer is no, then I'm, you know, probably not going to be in favor of all of that, because at the end of the day, we've always been a very family-oriented community that loves this town and wants to give back to this town, and it becomes this circle of life. And that's what a lot of the people that have been moving here, some of the new people that have only been here for a couple of years, that's what they're looking for. That's why they came here. It's because they came here, they saw, they got a great feel, and they want to live that. They want to bring their kids into that. And they like the school. But yes, the classrooms can be overcrowded. But unfortunately, as a city council, we cannot make the decisions of the school district. They have to make those decisions as well. And so that comes with their impact fees, that comes with their outlines of their different wards and their different zonings and all of that sorts of stuff. And so there's bigger pictures there as well that we have to consider.
I find it interesting how like the questions are formatted in let's start with downtown, central business district, and then kind of work out from there and look at housing and how to draw business, and how to make it more enjoyable there, move into parks and rec, which has been a big topic for the city council and the city in a big way, and not because it's lacking, but because preservation to make sure that it remains. And even though we do have our primary functions and we can get out of bed with that with overspending and then not being able to function with reduced police force, reduced staff and finance and all that stuff. And then we're looking at possibly selling off property in order to fund certain things or make up, if we're not going to go into debt. So looking at that long-term goal, what's up the mountain? And then we're down here, and then we can kind of start aiming towards that. We'll have those obstacles in the way, but we know what we're kind of aiming for. We're aiming for a community that has well-balanced parks and rec scene, functioning downtown business district that's beautiful. And then the big topic, the elephant in the room that was mentioned in the survey, more than anything, are big housing complexes, big apartment buildings. How dense are we going to get? How much are we going to grow? Can our schools afford that? So that's going to be a big topic, but seems like we're establishing these key criteria of what we want to see in 20 years. And then kind of moving towards like, okay, what's realistic within the next topic, which is housing.
Well, that's a great segue into housing. Thank you. Which we're going to spend quite a bit of time on in comp plan, and I know the planning commission has already been spending a lot of time on housing. So we just wanted to get your read, where your thoughts were. And a question that has come up is protecting existing neighborhoods. And in your view, are there any existing neighborhoods, mobile home parks, for example, that may be at risk of displacement? And if that's the case, whether you're interested in adding some policy language. For example, with a mobile home park, you can have very specific mobile home zoning so that someone can't come in and purchase that mobile home park and convert it into expensive condominiums. But you know, that comes with other issues on its own. So I wanted to have a conversation about that, and also jump into where you feel that middle and low income housing may be suited in Sedro-Woolley. And that middle housing generally can be found in regular all kinds of neighborhoods. They're cottages, they're tiny homes, live work studios, triplexes, duplexes. And if there is growth happening, whether you want to see it scattered or if you see some areas of the city that it would work. Now you're thinking long-term. Now, again, like we're not building it, but you're just providing the capacity for it for someone else to come and build it.
Yeah, absolutely. So at our last council meeting, we annexed, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was about 48. Okay. So, and if you look at our UGA, that kind of takes us to the end of the line there, right? A lot of the housing in that area, I think is going to be developed at a very in stride, hopefully, with what our infrastructure can handle. But when we talk about middle housing, have you been up Trail Road? It's right behind Food Pavilion, and I haven't driven in and out of all the streets, but it's an absolute maze of middle housing there. Most of it's not done. A lot of it's not done, but some of it is. So when you're talking about middle housing, and then the word affordable housing keeps getting thrown around. So when we're talking about affordable housing, are we talking about taxpayer subsidized housing, or are we talking about developers who will make their rent super low because they don't care about turning a profit? Because those are always the two things that I run into, right? So we're having these huge apartment buildings built behind McDonald's that are not full by any stretch of the imagination. There's a lot of people who can't afford to live there, so they're just not filling up. So as far as middle housing, it seems like we have an adequate chunk of it, right? Kind of almost directly in the center of what our city limits would be, maybe just slightly to the west. So when we're talking about displacing other neighborhoods. Most of the other neighborhoods within town are very well-established neighborhoods. Now, some of them are a little bit on the lower income side. When I did a lot of my research when I was campaigning, I realized I went from Ward 5 to Ward 4 because the boundaries changed. And I very quickly was got brought to the fact that I live in one of the lower income, the older neighborhoods, some of the houses that were a little bit older and more rundown, a lot of them were rentals, a lot of them were more affordable. Are we talking about getting rid of some of those houses and doing middle housing there? I'm trying to get up to speed on kind of what we're discussing here and like what we're looking to do as part of the
I think
conflict.
you're hitting on what a point I was trying to make is that you already have some really great existing neighborhoods that probably provide some middle to lower income housing already. And what's happening in other parts of the state is that they're being replaced with newer housing that is no longer affordable for working families, for example. And so the home families that were living there are displaced. Yeah. So sounds like Sedro-Woolley has a really nice mix. And from what I've seen, I've done a lot of driving around. I don't live here, but I've become familiar with it. And actually my youngest child, we've applied to Job Corps at the Swift Center. And so I was able to see some of the housing around there too. That's something that if you have a neighborhood that is providing really good housing and accommodating families, you don't want to lose those. That's just another question. It's preservation of existing housing stock in addition to new stock.
Because I don't look at any of our stock anywhere as affordable. If I wouldn't have bought my house when I did, I could not afford to live here, and that's a very sad statement. Fifth generation. The apartments, all of the new housing that's going in, no one can afford it. So I don't know where this affordable housing, even for everyday, no one can afford anything that's coming in here. So this affordable, what is affordable now? Because it's nowhere. It's not in the mobile parks. It's not in our apartments. It's not in our existing neighborhoods. So
I think we're shrinking the standard down to a tiny home, ADU in somebody's yard is going to be that affordable. And it's Sedro-Woolley, but it's also nationwide and Spokane statewide, let's say, but I can go into the national statistics too, just from personal experiences. But Spokane, my parents bought a house over there for, I think it was like 140, and it's over doubled in price in a few years that they've been there, just because, this housing crisis. And I don't know how you have a nationwide housing crisis all of a sudden because our populace didn't just double, right? So it's weird how it works. It almost looks like it's not quite organic. That's my thing. But the cost of everything, like you said, is going up, and it reduces. We keep hearing we need affordable housing when we need something else. Right now, the only thing affordable is a $40,000 ADU in somebody's yard. Yeah, and that's $800, $900 a month, $1,000 a month. Somebody was just telling me about 800 square foot, 1-bedroom apartment for $1,650. That's like, holy cow, to me, that's really high.
So, yeah. We got a lot of comments about Trail Road area and the densification there. And something I was curious about, we have all these rental properties going in where people are not building well from where they're at. Is there any way for us to encourage the building of condos in some of these situations instead of just apartments, so that senior who doesn't want to take care of their yard anymore, or that family that's just getting started but wants to be able to purchase something, might have a lower cost option? Is it possible for us to start doing that?
So I brought that up with Paul Woodmansey of BYK, who is a resource that is he's a great guy. So the reason was that they weren't doing condos anymore was because the state didn't have law that protected the builder of the condominium complex we're up to 4 to 5 years, windows are gonna shrink, this, that, and the other thing. So all these law firms were coming in and just now suing the HOAs and everything, so they just stopped doing it. So they just changed that law, say 3 years ago. And like where I'm at right now, I'm right here in the downtown 48, I would buy that in a heartbeat because I don't want to do, I don't want to do all those things. So that's why you've seen a lot of apartments and things like that. The condos have kind of disappeared. So I think at some point you're gonna see that normalize. And just one last thing, we're working on the tiny home, ADU, cottage, issues right now. We're approaching it very, very carefully. Okay, when you start talking about tiny homes, ADUs, where you want to put them, the densities of different things, but we're just not jumping into that. We're going to get all the information possible. We've seen some really nice projects, but we've also seen some projects, I was looking around myself, and down in Seattle, in Heritage Portsmouth Homes, you head up to like Whatcom, they're nice. Okay, so there's a whole blend of different things. We're taking our time with it, to get it right.
On that note, is there the possibility for the city with code when it comes to somebody installing one of those in their property? That if it is going to be low or very low income housing, that we cut the costs of development fees, anything that the city has control over? Is that a possibility?
That you have control over, but I mean, at the end of the day, you still need to buy the land, still need to hook up the plumbing, hook up the sewer. And we were talking about just even an ADU, right?
Yeah.
So let's look at a small, let's just say 600 square feet. Okay, and there's different ones. You have tiny homes, you have park models that technically they're on wheels. So it's DOL, that is the governing organization, versus a tiny home of the same size, which is code, right? So there's different ways to slice and dice it. That's what we looked at. When we're looking at tiny homes and the ADUs, that park model is very valid. It's very valid as an option, because all you do is put skirting on it. We're talking about different styles of skirting, then it looks like a regular foundation. So that was part of our last discussion in our last meeting. So we are getting into things.
Well, what I was thinking in saying that is having a code that literally makes it so that if you apply for it under that type, you get discounts or no.
They're
fees,
reduced now, I
but-
believe, yeah.
But a requirement that it remained that low, very low income housing, and if you should ever decide to use it for a different purpose, you then have to apply for it.
We were
Basically
talking-
locking it in.
We were talking about that as well. So there's organizations, we looked at in California, Arizona, right? So it was a organization that actually bought all the buildings. And there was whatever you paid for it in whatever year, there was a limit of what you could sell it for future year. So it was maybe a 2-3% bump by the time you sold it, but you still had to buy it at that lower level. So nobody was investing in something that all of a sudden they were going to double or triple their money. And that's how they controlled that. And Donna helped us out with some of that. We had a whole round table with a whole bunch of different people, including one of the developers, David, Mr. Faber.
Yeah.
Okay, so he runs West Coast Homes. He did the project up in on Lake Whatcom. So he's been a resource like you would not believe. Just even on the licensing of things as far as who's doing what the costs are for different things. So it's a lot more complicated than you might think.
Oh, I see.
Especially controlling the costs on things, because it's free market in many respects. Thanks.
Yeah, I was just thinking if there's a way to streamline, make it cheaper, more likely that new family starting out, the senior who's.
Those discussions
looking
have
at that
definitely been on the table, and they're absolutely there.
If we had our old comprehensive plan projecting almost, I think it was like 90-something% growth, right? And now this one today, from 2022 is projecting 38% growth. Aren't we at less people or projected less growth over by 2036-ish range?
I did that calculation. I based it on 12,000.
Yeah.
Because I remember in 2022 times 1.038. That's what I said. I get like 16,000 something. It goes 17,000.
Which is less than what
The last time I heard was like 24,000.
So in that, like, we're looking at, making this home band or creating more densification. It seems like we have actually taken a huge load off our shoulder as far as like this push to build, if we're no longer anticipating this big growth span.
Right, yeah, for the previous comp plan, you didn't have to provide capacity for different income bands. Now you do. And so you probably have, I haven't finished seeing the full analysis yet, but have plenty of capacity for the 80% AMI and above. But probably not enough capacity for 60% of average median income and below.
That changes depending on the jurisdiction.
Right.
AMI in King County is like 80% is like $95,000. They're considering low income people like 80 grand a year.
But it circles us right back to the start with Joe Allen's statement of like, what constitutes that 60% range? And what would we ultimately be looking at? Because right now, 1-bedroom apartment, 2-bedroom apartment's not it. We actually had a charitable organization come in and they were gonna build a complex with 42 units. And it was gonna cost them $440,000 per unit to build, right? And you're thinking, well, that's not affordable. These aren't affordable places that people can go into. So how do we accomplish that and be able to meet that range, that bandwidth range?
Gosh, that is a magic question. Yeah.
We can't just like say, we're gonna zone this, or we're gonna do this, or we add this in the comp plan, but nobody even knows what that house for 60% looks like.
Well, and I think that comes with partnerships with small organizations that don't necessarily rely on government grants, because you've got all those all that red tape, right? So when we were talking about that one program, it was $20 million to build 42 units. And if you calculate it out, it was $476,000 and change. And if the average person there that didn't qualify for Section 8 or low income based on their income and in a working family, there's a lot of people that can't afford that right now, especially with the interest rates on their income working full time. And so you want to take that burden and put it on the taxpayers. And that's incredibly difficult when you realize that $20 million could do so much more if it was handled differently and processed through, maybe an organization that didn't have to go through all of the red tape and didn't have to use union workers at prevailing wages for 2 years to build, like all of that stuff adds up and it's significantly expensive. And it's really hard to figure out then what becomes actually considered low income when we continually get hit with all of these prices over and over and over again, because we want nothing more than everybody in this community to have a place to call home and to feel safe and to feel comfortable in it, regardless of what that looks like to them. Some people's idea of a home, is 400 square feet and very small and cozy, and it's a place to call theirs, and that's completely fine. And some people have different ideas and want, a 3-story home on, 30 acres and there's no right or wrong to what somebody wants to feel in their home, but they do, need to have a safe, comfortable place to be. But in finding that, it's goes back to what a couple different council members have said, is that what then becomes actually affordable in the housing market, and what are we calculating it off of? Because the rents right now are absolutely outrageous. One of the apartment complexes for a 1-bedroom wanted $2,400. And that's more than a lot of people's mortgages if you bought your house before 2016. And so, a starting family can't not afford to go rent and then look at the opportunity to buy. And so I think that's why there are some people that are looking into putting multifamily units within their homes if they can. We did open up our ADU opportunities. Have we had any additional applicants or ADU?
We asked that question all
Requests?
the time, by the way. It hasn't been that many. And we were curious about that when we first put it in, but what we
Yeah.
tried to do is front run the state putting something into legislation, so at least we have a say of what's gonna be in place.
Right.
And once we did that, I think we only had about 7 or 8 applications. It's expensive.
It's
Not
very
even from
expensive.
on the permitting side, it's everything else that goes along with it.
I live on Jamison Street. There's a lot of families that are putting in fifth wheels you know, because they've got, you know, 18 to 21, 22-year-old kids that just can't afford rent, you know, and so there's a lot of trailers and fifth wheels moving into properties,
Which they're not supposed to be doing.
which is where the kids are living all the time. I mean, I personally know, I have 2 friends that are doing that with their, you know, 19 and 18-year-old kids, because they cannot afford an apartment, so they just put a fifth wheel on their property. That's their first apartment.
How many people know that we've changed the rules with ADUs, that it's something that is allowed? They're able to do if they can financially do it, that is, because obviously a fifth wheel is substantially cheaper. Something that I kind of veered off a little bit earlier when I was talking about the densification. We hear people telling us they don't want that deep densification. We talk about mixing it up a little bit for multiple reasons. That helps with the health of the neighborhood as far as the environment that kids are in. You don't get a higher crime rate in a dense neighborhood that becomes older in 20 years. Once the apartments aren't taken care of as well, things of that nature is something that's a concern that will not help our neighborhoods. I'm wondering if really a lot of the things that are coming down at the state level are things that are going to be challenging to us with the lower cost for housing, making it so that there's a lot more requirements for people, or are there things at the city level that we are able to do that's going to simplify it? I understand that it's not just us, not just our costs, but like, where is that distribution of costs coming from at a governmental level that we can either change what we're doing or start looking at the state and going, hey, we really need this change. You want low income housing, or you want housing that is affordable? This has to change in order for it to happen, because you're creating these pieces of red tape that are slowing down a person from being able to build or purchase that home. I'm needing to wrap my head around what those things
Yeah,
are.
you know, you bring up a good question, and the planning commission had a discussion regarding the energy code. That has substantially contributed to the cost of heating and cooling in homes, quite a bit. And so, but with those units that they build on Watcom Lake, because it's
part-time, it's 6 months out of the year.
yeah,
We
they
have a
fall under a
situation.
different code.
Yeah.
They didn't have the same energy requirement. And so he was able to build them for a lot less than he would have if he had to use the other code.
Just not to mention too, all the state code that came down, we watched that. So we knew a lot of this stuff was coming at us. There's one thing we need to do as a community. We need to separate what affects us. What they've done is ship a lot of other jurisdictions issues down to everybody else. See, a lot of this stuff started over in Seattle and King County. Okay, and this got pushed out statewide. Like, my problem is everybody else's problem. If you look around Sedro-Woolley, we've done a lot of things really, really well. I think we're almost maxed out on our R15 zone as far as the amount of density we can put in. So everybody's seeing all this new construction come in, which is good. Okay, so we're getting the housing. It's brand new. It's to code. It's to design guidelines. We're almost maxed out on R15. I'm looking around the city. I don't know how much we really have left. So this whole big build out on the apartment side and stuff like that, we're right about 80, at least 90% done on that. Then the whole middle housing that you brought up, like behind the food pavilion, things like that. So we're definitely accommodating stuff. Now people have to buy things. Right? But the interest rates, and none of us control anything like that, or the market, dynamics in general. So
To accommodate the bandwidth and the comprehensive plan that we started with, that's the main thing that I think that we're struggling with, because we're not growing as much as we originally thought, and we have plenty of our 80% above. We're looking at that affordable housing and whatnot, and we still don't even know what that looks like. So it sounds like Olympia is imposing upon us ruling that cannot be defined, and then we're going to be held to that. And the only way to really do something about that sounds like ideas are to subsidize in a way, almost. So the taxpayer is paying rents for people because the cost of rent is too high, which is only putting a further burden onto other taxpayers. So that underlining bandwidth that we're required to have, I'd just love to have more definition. How much are they looking for in future? And then what is the ultimate cost of that going to be? And if it is subsidized at all by the taxpayer, I mean, we should really, go back to Olympia and say that's, that doesn't make any sense. You're taxing all of our citizens at that point, more so. So our property taxes are outrageous and they're not even as bad as they are in other places.
I think some of the thought process behind it too is that by providing avenues for local jurisdictions to add more housing in certain neighborhoods like duplexes and triplexes where they were before, like Ballard, if you've been into Ballard, will add more housing and with more stock, that will drive prices down. But we haven't seen that yet. And so I think you guys are all making some really excellent points here and comments. And we had a conversation with an architect, Ross Chapin, who developed the cottage concept. And his dream at the beginning, this was 30 years ago, is that cottages were going to be affordable housing. Well, they're so darn cute. And he did such a great job designing them. They're in huge demand. And so now they're over $400 a square foot. And so he's kind of re-looking at ways of redesigning his cottages so that he can make them more affordable. But it's been a big disappointment for him because that was a big hope for us. But going back to what Joe mentioned in terms of this organization, so what he was talking about are land trusts. So, and I had seen them to be very successful models in other communities, because we're getting to the point where maybe we do need some sort of subsidy. And what it is that it's a nonprofit organization that acquires land from one way or another. They either raise the money or the land is donated to them. Other jurisdictions will donate land to them. And what they do, and then they figure out how to get housing on it. Sometimes I wasn't with one many years ago where we moved houses that people didn't want over to our properties. We also partnered with Habitat for Humanity. We provided the land, they built the homes, and the land is not, and so then people can come in and buy the homes on the land trust properties, but they don't have to pay for the land. They lease the land and they lease the home for $5 a year. So the cost of the land gets taken out of the picture. And generally then the communities, fundraising is used for it to help build a home. And so people are able to buy a home. They agree to a formula. Usually it's 75% or 60% of market value. They buy it at 60%, 75% of market value, and then they have to hang on to it for 2 or 3 years. And then if they want to resell it, they have to sell it at the same, using the same formula. And they've been very successful. They do target a certain population, not very, very low income, but for example, there's three or four projects up in the San Juans, and the people are living there. They're the teachers, they work for the county, they work for the cities, they fire department. Those are the folks that are living there. And because otherwise they wouldn't be able to afford a place to live there, but they need those people there. So, I mean, that's, and one place that the city can do is if a land trust was formed here, and if the city had land that they could provide to the land trust, then you can form a partnership.
It would be easier, I mean, from a planning commission side, it would be nice to know, like, how many units are we talking about? You're saying that you're planning by income band, and so you've probably done all the research to know the demographics of the community and what percentage of housing we have currently that's, single family occupancy versus multi-tenant. So how many more units are we looking at that need to be built and available within the city limits in order to meet the state requirement?
We will have that information available to you very soon. We're in the middle of that study. And so what we're doing is doing a housing needs analysis right now, determining what you have. And then we'll be doing a gap analysis, and that's going to answer your question. So hopefully we'll have that draft report done within 4 weeks, hopefully.
And now what happens then if the city doesn't have the infrastructure to support what the state is requiring?
The infrastructure, you're talking about sewer, water,
Roads,
everything.
yeah,
everything.
yeah.
Because right now we have Cook Road coming in and out, we have Highway 20. That, I mean, we're
we're roadblocked when it comes there. We won't be expanding in regards to that. When it comes to our current public safety, when it comes to just all of it. The state is putting all of these requirements on us, starting in Olympia and pushing itself out. But the hard reality is that Sedro-Woolley is landlocked in as far as we can go. I mean, that's the reality. We just took in about 48 acres, and there's not much new on the horizon. And I know that that's all up for discussion and stuff as well. But when you look at all of that, and then you look at what the city or what the state is trying to put on the cities, some of it isn't even reasonable. And then when you look at a lot of the climate requirements, some of that, in my opinion, is not reasonable. And I think that there are things that the city already does that should be okay and should be suffice in our comp plan. And so I just struggle with trying to say that, we are going to have all of these different things happen. And I know that we need to create this plan for the state, but at what point does the state's requirement become completely unreasonable from your standpoint when you create these plans?
Being a 20-year plan, you have a little bit of time. If you get to that point where for example, if we find that you're gonna need, I'm just throwing out 300 new units for very low income. Where are you gonna put them? And then where's their infrastructure going to come from? And there's a couple options. You can plan ahead. You start planning at your capital, CIP and TIP over the next few years, put the burden on the developer, but then that raises the cost. It turns into this vicious circle. Or you go back to the state and have a conversation with them. And I think that a lot of rural communities are doing that. And GMA was based on urban areas, and rural communities have over the years gone back to them and said, those rules make a lot of sense in Seattle and Olympia, but they don't make sense here. This is what would work better for us. And I have found, I think overall, a lot of the rules have changed substantially because of pushback. I'm not saying you should. If you stay within the spirit of the Growth Management Act, and you make that argument, that they might be amenable to it. But I think, I can't say for sure, but I do feel that Sedro-Woolley has good capacity. But we'll know for sure when our study is finished. Yeah.
Just add into that, the comp plan, okay, it's kind of like, it's created of goals and policies. It isn't like we have to sit right now and draw out, this is exactly the way it's going to happen. It's saying that we have a goal to accomplish this, and our policy is this is the way that we're going to get there. It is not going to happen overnight. As economic cycles go up and down with different things. All it is a roadmap from getting from point A to point B. As we all know, there's a whole different bunch of ways to get from here to Bellingham, right? We want to get from here to Bellingham, but we got a whole bunch of different options. And that's what a comp plan is. It's goals and policies.
We review it every 5 years.
Right.
So 5 years from now, we may be sitting in a completely different place with completely different needs.
Right.
So for example, people are not having children anymore. There's going to be a huge decrease in population. It's going to impact our economy. That's a whole nother story, that's a whole nother conversation. But my point being that 5 years from now, we're going to be looking at a different economy with different needs. And at that point, we can revise it. Is, to me, a comp plan is a living, breathing thing. You change it as your needs change.
It does lock us into policy decisions and regulatory requirements, especially from planning to the council to say, hey, this is what you guys got to do. It's part of the state and the comp plans, and now you're locked in. In some cases, right now, let's say we have 8,500 homes in Sedro-Woolley, and we're finding that over 70% of them are in this 80% range, and the rest are kind of heading that way, with only some in the lower income range. But according to the state, we need to have this much in that bandwidth, let's say 40% or whatever. that means that we have to stop all other growth, and any new growth would really have to be aimed towards that. And it would limit free market ability to grow within the community. And it would pretty much insist like, oh, well, if we were gonna do that, your affordable housing, determine what's affordable is $1,200 a month, will be a small tiny home, or, you know, the duplexes, the quadplexes, they're not much cheaper. They're not like, hey, here's a quadplex and we've solved the problem. A while back, we had a really good discussion, and it was with the planning commission. It was like, how do we want to see the city? We don't want to see blocks of apartments, but we see the apartments distributed throughout the community with multifamily homes, quadplexes, and duplexes in neighborhoods, so that the apartments are also part of the neighborhood, and that reduces crime and stuff. But if we're limited on all of that stuff, because this plan out of Olympia from Seattle is saying, hey, you got to have 40% all low income going forward, and you've already peaked on all these other housing levels, all you can put forth in your city is this. Then when the developer comes in and says, well, I'd like to do this, or somebody wants to build a home or something like that, we're going to refer back to our comp plan and say, we're maxed out here. We have to insist you do this, is what it seems like. Is that correct, Joe, or is that my
Kind of, maybe,
That's how I'm understanding.
right? It's a kind of maybe kind of thing, because we're not gonna know until it gets there. And the hard numbers are just gonna be really difficult to accommodate, because there's a lot of stuff already in place. Like I said, we're already maxed out pretty much on the R15. What's in place is in place, and that's free market. Right, so all the new stuff coming in, yeah, we can do from a zoning standpoint, this is the type of housing that can go in there, and now we originally just wanted one ADU per residence. Now the state says, well, two. Well, how do I get 2 ADUs on a 6,500 square foot lot? The state of Washington says, okay, what am I gonna do with 2 dog houses? Are you gonna call them an ADU? So yeah, you look at a lot of stuff and you have to weed through it a little bit. But like the mayor said, it's a living, breathing document that we have to have. Their goals and policies. There's nothing in concrete like, okay, and here, this is gonna be 40% of an average, whatever income is, depending on Skagit County or Whatcom or whatever. So there's all these crazy formulas. Now, I've seen different jurisdictions do different things, like Shoreline, for instance, around all their multifamily, around all the new like rail stations. What they did was they said, okay, you can go 70 feet within X proximity of the light rails, but we'll give you another 50 feet, up to 140 feet or about there. If you now take 60, you now take 30% of the entire units, make them available to 60% of the average income in King County. So again, it depends on the jurisdictions. Ours is going to be a lot lower at Skagit County than it is in sections of King County and every place else. So you see different jurisdictions doing different things. And that's what we've always done as a planning commission. We're looking at other jurisdictions to see what they did, right? Like right now with the ADUs, Bellingham's done some stuff that's pretty good. So we're planning a visit to do a field trip up there to see what they did, what works, what doesn't work, what the challenges are. We just don't want to just like all of a sudden just get something in code because it needs to work. No. We need to be really careful when we put that stuff together. Because now you're talking high density. Now you're looking at changing the existing code into something it wasn't really intended to be.
Well, the thing that caught my attention with the densification or bringing in more low income was the land trust idea. And I just think like, so nonprofit or government comes in, buys the land, and then the house is on there. Somebody can, basically you're renting, you're not owning the house, especially, we don't even own our land. We're paying taxes on it all the time. We stop paying taxes to lose it. But that becomes kind of a scary situation because that becomes the cheapest way to do it. So that's the growth of it, of accommodating that requirement, is actually have more of this government owned land with houses on there. And I just go back to this Charles Schwab type thing that's like, you'll own nothing and you'll like it. And I'm like, you know, as prices increase, we got quantitative easing challenges. We had the feds raise the rates to stop inflation. Houses were supposed to go down. Prices were supposed to go down because demand was supposed to go down. Prices didn't go down. Now they're forced to look at lowering the rates, which is only going to bring demand up higher as the housing market isn't diminished. So the prices grow. We get taxed out of our homes. We can't afford our homes anymore, or to buy homes, and now we're stuck on this renting from government land type stuff. So it's one of those things that I'd like to see that in writing, or see something of what's actually being defined, because the way it sounds is we're really, we're good in our city, but we're gonna make some changes to accommodate low income that could, seems to me, set us into a direction that might not be.
We have until December 2025 to get it done. We have a whole bunch of other stuff in between, just saying.
Well, I have to say, I've worked for a few communities and lived in one. I've been a council member myself, and I've just been really impressed with all of you. It's just, you work so well together, and I've attended both your meetings, and very involved with your community. We had really good turnout at the open house. The next open house we did, we only had like 6 people show up at another community. So just congratulations. I don't know what you guys are all doing, but and just applaud you for your devotion and how much you love this community. It really shows.
So I was looking at the red lines of the county-wide planning policies, and the table 2, if my understanding was correct, and I know you probably don't have that in front of you, that was allocating actual housing units projected to Sedro-Woolley. So that would be, to me, it seems that would be a number that the council members were kind of asking, what are we doing for? Is that correct, that when we're doing our comp plan update, we're kind of looking at that, because we are aiming to be able to capture and meet those projections that are coming to us from the state and ultimately then through the county, the allocations. So if I'm reading this correctly, it's showing 831 units in the 0 to 30% AMI for Sedro-Woolley. So that would be a number. Obviously it's just a projection, but then how do we meet that? And maybe a trust would be, because then we could have a concrete, okay, this is how many units we're going to need to capture. And yeah, that's the only way I can think of doing that.
Yeah, so
because there's no way to control free market capitalism. You can't tell builders other than, that's the closest thing, trust. So.
Right, and so I don't know where the cities are with adopting the countywide planning policy amendments.
We did take a look at that. We did run it through planning commission and city council too. And so we're past that part and bringing that back to council and governments. Not all cities are, we're a little bit ahead of some of the others in our area.
Yeah, but yeah, that was a really good question. So the way it works is the state comes up with a population figure and then says to the county, okay, you need to figure out your housing allocations between all of you. With the county as the lead. And then, so the jurisdictions in the county get together and figure that out. And then that filters down to the comp plans.
And of course, right now it's just the draft, but there will be final numbers that will come out at some point.
Right, and that's what we've been waiting to finish our study based on what the county and you all are going to approve.
So is it optional for us to adopt that county plan? Is that what I'm now understanding, or is that something where they're going to say, hey, here's 831 houses you guys need to fit in your community? And if so, then what are we doing with the comp plan gap analysis if they've already decided that?
Well, it's a decision between, it's kind of the cart before the horse versus the cart. So we've been kind of waiting for this as well to figure out. And so there's a bigger number and countywide. And what the counties are saying statewide are saying, we can't take all the lower income bands in our counties because we don't have the facilities to do it. So all you cities, you need to take those numbers. And so it's a little frazzling because in jurisdictions like in Island County where there's only 3 cities, they have to take all 60% of AMI and below. And that means Oak Harbor is taking 65%. And so that everyone acknowledges, right, you can't have someone who's below 60% and place them out in 10 miles from, yeah, but how to do that. So everyone's going through this right now, trying to figure this out and battling amongst themselves, especially the cities and themselves. But it's going to be really interesting to see how it all ends up.
Yes, lifting the lower income into a middle income bracket. The challenge is that a lot of middle income have become the low income. And that's just creating a problem. And we do have pretty, we have good paying jobs, especially around Skagit, but we're seeing that middle income. So the middle income's what's growing that bandwidth in the low income market now. How do we stop that and get those guys? No, that's something that we can't. Ultimately, until somebody looks at that, what's 5 years or 10 years going to be like? Is it more of the lower income? So, because you gotta, I didn't know every county was pushing back, but that means every county is saying, hey, there's too many low income. Red flag. That's a problem.
Yeah.
When I look at the House bill, it says you have to have income bandwidth for half. Many of the cities have put that on the low income. The only solution I see is through land trust. Because as Commissioner Beverly mentioned, you can't tell a developer you can only charge this much for rent. So I think the only way I see to drive them for cost, low income housing, to offer a land trust. I don't see any other solution. If we're gonna abide by the law.
It seems like a dangerous precedent, though. Once we start government, nonprofit ran by government, buying land, and the lower income's growing, more people have to go on to land trust, which means that there's less and less property that people own, which was originally the American dream, which is what you leave your children, which is you're losing that. We need to look at the root. Yeah, it's your wealth, and the root of the problem is this low income deal. And if we say let's deal with this by expanding land trust or doing these land trusts, we will lose our lands eventually. I mean, right now, more and more people are in that lower income bracket that 10 years ago were middle income and own their home. Now they're saying, well, the government will own your land that you used to own, but you can afford no more, but you can live in a house that we will build for you, but you can only sell it at such amount when you move. They won't have anything for their kids' college funds. They won't have anything for leaving their grandchildren to grow up on. It's a dangerous precedence to set, I believe. I'm not in favor of land trust. If people like farmers want to give their fields into land trust, I helped my buddy who was a close friend of mine right before he died, put 200 acres of his farm into a land trust. And we put a lot of work into doing that because we really wanted to do that. And that was his choice. But, as far as like moving into properties, houses, things like that in cities, I don't know, that's dangerous.
Well, we don't have the space for it.
And
I mean, if you get on
would buy
maps
people's
and look
houses,
around, we don't
we
have
would
the
buy
space.
people's houses and then, or buy their homes and they're getting foreclosed on and evicted. City would come in, nonprofits would come in, buy them up, and then now they would own it. And then they would start renting the house.
Yeah, I agree. That's not a good that's not a really good option, but, going back to the House bill, was it 1210, you said? House Bill 1210 on the income bands. 1120. Okay, I got my numbers mixed up. So can you touch a little bit more on like what income bands that are actually in the language of that House bill that has, I'm assuming that it passed?
Yes.
Okay, can you go into a little bit more depth of the language of what those income bands are and what the unfunded mandate that they're giving us
You know,
actually
I'd have to
is.
pull it up. I pulled it up before I came here and I thought, should I print it, and bring it with me? Yeah, so I don't have it in front of me, but it's based on AMI. What we were talking about below, for I think like 30 below and 60 below and 80 below and above 80%. And that varies by community. And so the state has that data. I don't have it with me, but I can provide that to you. If that would be
For our city specific.
right.
And certain things don't apply to us because of our population. So depending on the population of the city, certain things are kind of like mandatory where we don't have to comply with a whole bunch of different things.
Yeah.
Because we're under like 15,000, there's like a magic cutoff number. If you're 25 and below, you don't have to do certain things, 25 and above. They have a totally different set of rules.
So could you list all the things that don't apply to us the next time we meet, so we can just, not worry about like, oh, we have to build 5,000 homes for, you know. So then that way our discussion is just streamlined as far as what we're required to put into our comp plan, not required to do, but required to put into our plan, showing intent. But all of these things that don't apply to us being not Mount Vernon's population and not Anacortes' population,
Yes,
they just go away.
yeah.
And that'd be nice, because sometimes I struggle, I look at this comp plan and I see, okay, what are all the things we need to do? And all these house bills that are coming out, and, you know, it seems like these bills are showing up more and more and more, especially since they just got out of session not too long ago. And they all know that we're doing our comp plan, so they just like packed a bunch of stuff in a bag and just said, here you go. If we know what we can take out of that bag and throw in the garbage, it's gonna put a lot of people's minds at ease, I think.
There
So
are good things that are going in the garbage. I already looked. I was okay with it.
Did you bring a list?
I already looked at 1120. I thought it was the first thing I looked at because we didn't know what version it was gonna be until finally it was enacted, but we kind of skated out of a lot of really good things. So you will like what goes into the bag, but that's a great idea to get that summarized. Yeah. Some cities got some really big things.
Yeah, one of the big one that comes to my mind is that certain jurisdictions are required to allow not only ADUs, but up to fourplexes and medium density residential neighborhoods.
Single family residential zones, quads. You skated out a lot.
well, Mount Vernon's stuck in that. They're stuck in that because they have.
They got their own stuff. Talk to the permit tech right there.
Right, but yeah, we'll do that. We'll prepare kind of a list, a summary of all the regulations regarding housing, and we'll put in one column what's not applicable to you and the other column, if that's helpful.
That makes it easy, because when we're trying to explain to our constituents and, you know, the people who entrusted us to make these decisions for them, and sometimes I don't know everything, every box that we have to check. So I'm like, well, that doesn't sound like us. That sounds like a larger jurisdiction. But let me get back to you on that. If I already have a cheat sheet, it really helps with the phone calls.
Okay, yeah.
Thanks.
And are you guys handling the climate section of that, or is that a different consultant?
They're covering, there is a sub-consultant that's working with.
Right, so
Because that would also apply to that as well, where there is jurisdictional differences with that part, right?
yes, for example, greenhouse gas emissions, certain cities, but they're smaller than yours, don't have to do that inventory. I believe it's over 10,000, under 10,000 don't have to do it. But yeah, we can do that also.
You guys are having your first committee meeting next month on that, right?
Right.
I think.
Is that the CPAP?
The CPAC.
What happens if, in November, they do refill a lot of that? Because I heard that's been on the docket. Is that on the docket? Refilling
I
part of
did not
that?
kept up with that. I don't know.
Been on the
Have
news
you
quite a
heard
bit that Washington might end up repealing part of the Climate Act. And it's gonna affect a lot of different cities.
Yeah, when I heard about that, we can do a little more research. It's gonna really affect the energy code and the requirement. Right now, they've made it So really the only option is to put in a heat pump. Otherwise, to meet the 5 or 6 credits, the energy code is pretty difficult. And so the one way to meet them is to put in heat pumps. And so that means the other all forms of heating using gas is, so if that gets, I'm thinking that's one item that might be changed. I don't know.
That is one that's specific that's being talked about, but I feel like
Yeah.
there was others too.
There might be. I guess we should find out.
Yeah, if we're spending a lot of money on that plan, it would be nice to know before we finalize anything, but because ultimately, it does make financial sense to have, and it makes fiscal sense to have, what we need to do and find out, if there are loopholes, if there are things that we're not needing to go so far on right now or whatnot, because obviously all of that costs. And I agree with Sarah on that, where we're running really far ahead of ourselves when it comes to that right now. And it's right now it's going to cost people a lot of money. And then that's ultimately this housing crisis, that low income crisis of middle income going down. Anything we can do to help mitigate that to the constituents would be great.
I heard similar rumblings of, and really a lot of it probably depends on how the election is to go. And if there's any sort of change in our governor, it's going to depend on who ends up in office there, quite honestly. And I've heard that, depending on who is there, there may be some repeals. And so, if we can just leave things open, and obviously this isn't needing to be complete until December of 2025. So we've got a little bit of time to figure that out. But that was one of the concerns initially, is how much we're putting into all of some of this that may get repealed, and how much of this is too much that's then becoming a burden to the taxpayers and a burden to the businesses and all of the stuff that's really not necessary and doesn't, in the long run, big scheme of things, doesn't really do much to mitigate.
Okay, we'll work on doing some sort of cheat sheet for those 2 parts of the comp plan, the climate element and the housing element. Yeah. And if you think of anything else, let Tom know.
I was hoping like for the whole comp plan,
For the
for
whole
like
comp
all the different, and how all the different House bills are gonna affect us, like from top to bottom, through all the different categories. I mean, these two are kind of, housing takes a lot of time to talk about. We talk about housing a lot, and we talk not so much climate a lot, but we do talk about housing a lot. So
And rightfully so, by the
yeah,
way.
yeah, and just so we know exactly what we're talking about, what the requirements are for our jurisdiction would be very helpful.
You bet. Yeah. Most of the changes were in housing and the climate, but yes, there were a couple like in transportation. And so we'll pull those out for you. Let you know what applies to you.
One of the first things we're doing with the climate piece is actually looking at your existing policies across the board to see where, you're already doing things that tackle some of the requirements that are coming down from the state, because you have things already spread out throughout your comp plan that address transportation issues and various other aspects that are going to affect climate. So that's one of the first things we'll look at to try to limit, what future changes need to take place.
There might also be a lot of useful stuff in the natural hazards mitigation plan too. Yeah, just don't reinvent the wheel if you don't have to.
So I have a question. You brought up transportation. It's something that we hadn't talked about it, but now it's been brought up. I have a question. And that is, I do know that with the 30% AMI, 50% AMI, 6% AMI, that it was my understanding that the state would like to see those housing accommodations built along transportation routes, which, in the cities that we have to build a lot of that possible high density within, areas we don't want to build high density in, because of the limited transportation that we have being further out. We don't have the transportation that Mount Vernon has or Bellingham has. And that's a concern, and I don't think it really fits, our culture of the way we live here in Sedro-Woolley. And I don't know what we can really do about that. I do know that some of that's gonna have to be put into the comp plan. I don't know if we have to determine where those are going to be, or if in the GMA, if we're gonna have to make a decision about, changing up our zoning in the city. But that worries me, because it could really change the look and the feel of our town.
Would we be able to request a schedule transit to modify routes?
So I did have conversation with the director of that. The issue is, we're talking about, how things are increasing and whatnot. Well, if grants that they had hoped for don't come through, the funding that they need, routes are cut. And yeah, I mean, everybody's being impacted by the economy right now. Inflation's really doing a number on us. And so,
do we know what kind of capacity these buses are actually carrying during their regular routes? In their current.
The capacity, what's the, how many people are actually getting aboard the bus? 'Cause they're
Correct.
pretty empty to me.
There's one that goes by my house on its schedule multiple times a day, and I've seen maybe 1 or 2 people ever. You go by the news station out by Walgreens, and there's maybe 2 or 3 cars out there, and some of them are just not even on the bus. So it's just I'd be curious to know what the actual usage has been in regards to that.
I do know early in the mornings, people do catch it and they
Right.
ride it over to Burlington, then they catch one of the X buses, whether it goes up to Burlington or down there, but they do
Right.
this. Quite a few people who do that. I can have those numbers.
But how much they're actually utilized before they're trying to move them around, we're still pretty small enough that a lot of people can either walk or ride. I see bikes parked out there once in a while, and people walk to them and stuff once in a while, but I feel like the last several years, we've done quite a bit to allow for additional transportation options and buses, but I don't feel like the community actually utilizes them as much as maybe it was anticipated. So that's why I'm curious to know what the utilization is.
Providing, and the comp plan, the fact that we are providing that, that it's there, yeah, we're compliant with that. So that's a great point, whether people use it or not, regardless of what the ridership level is, it's there. That structure is in place for people to use. Boom, box check.
What's the
comp
price
plan.
per person though? Is so we make the accommodation of the tax dollar, but we do these extra routes, we run extra fuel, we have our driver paid. What is the cost to accommodate that box per person, right? And we could be spending maybe $700 a month on a person, or $200 a month, or $30 a month on a person. We're paying the annual cost of the driver, the fuel, the cost of the bus, service of the bus. So I mean, all of that has to be taken into account when we're just checking a box.
Isn't that scheduled transit though that handles those numbers?
Yeah. You're right. So,
what,
going off on off-road in a little bit, they do the credits for greenhouse gases, things like that. Are they pursuing, or would there be a way to pursue credits for that low-income housing? And if so, what would that cost even look like? But they've got empty buildings in Seattle and cities all over the place. If they're looking at, hey, we need to densify low-income housing, turn a skyscraper into low-income housing, and then we have a credit that we have to pay for something like that. Is that even possible or an idea? I don't know. No, you're not. Maybe not a good idea. I'm just thinking they're pushing
Trying to follow
houses.
you, Nick.
So
I'm
they're
trying to follow
pushing
you.
densification of low income into the communities, right?
Right.
Whether we can do it or not, we already maxed out here. So all future growth would be proposed even in tiny homes or ranchos, things like that. But they have large empty buildings in cities all around the United States, and they have them in Seattle. And they're proposing turning those into apartments and things like that, and rechanging their zoning laws. So much like they do with, solar credits, things like that. You have to have so much solar energy, so they'll pay another business to put up solar panels on their roof in order to accommodate their solar credits. Can communities do that for for like Seattle? Hey, you got so many low-income housing in your place. Could we assist with some credits or pay with credits for that. See what I'm saying?
So like offsite mitigation.
Mitigating our
But
burden.
we're talking about people, right, instead of wetlands.
I said I was four-wheeling, Alan.
Well, to simplify, because it's already happened. It's called horse trading.
Okay.
So the city of Everett, okay, is saying to some of the other communities in Snohomish County, hey, we can handle your density. We'll take your density, so you can take that number off your books. I just heard Bellingham was doing the same thing with Ferndale. That they were gonna say, Ferndale, you take some of our density for X amount of new citizens, residents, all that kind of stuff. So it's called horse trading, real basic. Hasn't changed in human nature since the beginning of time.
Not a bad. So I'm wondering if that's something that, you know, maybe as more counties push back about this densification and we end up with more cities that are finding less and less people doing business in their skyscrapers and they're changing their own roles.
That's a really interesting concept, yeah.
I think you need to run for the state legislature.
Would make a difference.
We do it for air quality also, in addition to wetlands and others that where some polluters, I'm talking about factories.
Yeah.
They can buy credits to mitigate, because they're being fined for polluting. And so, but if they buy these credits, I mean that someone else is polluting less and they're getting excessive credits and they can sell them.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know the terminology, but it's kind of a similar concept. Yeah.
Carbon credits.
Carbon credits, that's right.
Well, and I just did a stormwater thing for Central Washington University and it was, you know, basically the same thing with stormwater, right? And being able to allocate because this person's using so much less and could they mitigate wetlands, things like that, so.
So I have a question.
Oh, okay. I guess, yeah, I know it's getting late, so,
Maybe jump to the public.
Yeah, we do have public comment. I wanted to leave time for that before it got to be 8:30, but I don't know if the council and the planning commission has shared everything they want to share.
I'd love to hear from the public.
Yeah.
So Don. Thank you.
oh, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no,
thank you.
that's
It's a pleasure
And Dan. So.
talking with you. Yeah.
Great job, Trish.
Alright, so, there isn't any unfinished or new business, so we will open it up to public comment right now. And, I know there are those that have signed up. If I call you, would you come forward? So I have, Connie Pryor. Yeah, Connie, would you like to come forward? And usually we give about 3 minutes, but we can give your name and how you're affiliated.
Yeah, okay, my name is Connie Pryor and I'm.
Do you want to come to, can you come to the, yeah.
The actual microphone's in the middle of that thing in the middle of the table.
Oh, so just
It'll
stand here
hear
and
you.
talk
You
loudly.
just talk there, yeah.
Okay, I can do that. My name is Connie Pryor and I live just outside of town. And I'm here to address the comprehensive plan. So, with this being a 20-year plan, the city and the interconnection of the county areas, I heard a lot of talk about the different recreational activities that take place here, and a lot of those take place in the county areas. The comprehensive plan has to take into consideration how the county and the state actions can directly affect the city's comprehensive planning. It's supposed to address the economic stability, housing, and capital facilities. So, given the goals of the comprehensive plan, I'm going to read this to try to keep it short so I don't go off track. Has the city planning considered the development of the battery energy storage system plant that is going in on the outskirts of town and how it will affect the city's comprehensive plan? If FSEC allows these plants to be built on the edges of the city limits, it's going to further box in the city and prevent possible annexations of areas that could be expanded upon. Councilwoman Diamond explained that, you know, you're boxed in by Highway 20 and another area, so really the only ways you have to go are up and down the valley. And if they start building these plants on the ends of the town, you have nowhere to annex to and expand. So the current proposed 8-acre plant will remove 2 current livable dwellings from our local housing market just outside the city. So does the city planning take into account how the plants and these future FSEC permitting projects could affect the expansion based on the plants removing residential livable dwellings from the market in the area? and how these plants will affect the land pricing and how that will affect the land, how the land pricing will affect the housing pricing, which will affect the rental pricing in the areas. And then how has the city planned for the emergency procedures for the expansion of the city plan along with the best plan? So with the best plan, we have a limited number of firefighters in Sedro-Woolley and in District 8, and the city would need to put out for additional levy to support contracting just with District 8, because we're contracted with District 8 to support the 2 full-time firefighters in District 8. So you would need additional training, you would need additional equipment, and you would need additional resources to assist with that best plan if there was ever a fire to take place there. So that would have to be additional tax dollars to the city and to the residents to pay for that, along with the local hospital and its capacities to respond to such an emergency. So along with all of those issues, and if there were an emergency at the best plant, how it would affect the city's drinking water, emergency shelters, and emergency evacuation plans. So I just want to make sure the city's comprehensive plan has addressed all of those issues, because it appears as though FSEC is moving forward strongly and quickly with this battery energy storage plant, and the entire city limits are within a 3-mile radius of that plant. So there's a lot of really good ideas here. However, none of them will take place if every penny from the city has to go to bolster our emergency planning. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And Mark? H? What's the other last name?
I thought that was your community sheet.
Okay, so, all right, that's fine, that's fine. And Rebecca's.
Hi, I am Rebecca Scrindy. I'm the CEO of Helping Hands Solutions Center out on Fruitdale and Wicker. And I wanted to let everybody know that's working on a comprehensive plan that Helping Hands was awarded $45,000 to help with the process from the Department of Commerce. Our focus is obviously the lower income folks, a lot of the people that use the food bank, but as I heard tonight, that's creeping up to not just the lower income folks. We're now seeing middle class folks. So some of the things that we've been doing, we also got awarded funding to help with the county's comprehensive plan. So we've been in Marble Mount, Concrete, Lyman, Hamilton. We're going into Mount Vernon, out in Anacortes on the Swinomish Reservation. The Upper Skagit, we have a board member that is the chairman of Upper Skagit. So if you guys need help to hear the voices of the population that you've really talked about tonight, which not a lot of them maybe even here are able to come here, ask us, let us know. It's $45,000 that the state gave us to help you. I'm really focused on this comprehensive plan, and I have a team of Eric, Amanda, and myself are going to be helping. So we are helping EDAS talk about barriers to jobs, childcare, not just food. So housing, some of our people are in the county one right now. As a matter of fact, we split our attentions tonight. But again, if you need surveys, if you need us to talk about things, just let us know. So we're here to help. So, and somebody else is paying for it, so. And it's a total of almost $100,000, so let's use the state's money to really help let the voices be heard of those who use social services and are in those kind of this weird housing world of not enough or not good enough housing that we all deserve. So thank you.
Thank you. Then I'll open it up to anyone else who would like to make public comment. Anyone else in the room? I don't know, Woody, is there anybody online? If so, they could raise their hand. Who would like to make public comment?
I do not see anybody raising their hand.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So that would end public comment. It is 8:22 and, if there's anything for the good of the order. If not, we are adjourned and the closed session, I don't know if that was, that information was, disseminated, but we are not going to have closed session. There's nothing to share with you tonight, so. Yeah, that is it. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody.